Thank you so much for having us here this afternoon. We are on a journey, I think, is how we'll best put it. We've been introduced UDL a few years ago into our school, and today we want to kind of bring you through our journey about how we've developed that over the past few years. We are in no way experts in this, so we want to make sure that we are learning, and we'll talk you through the process of what we've done. So today, kind of the main areas we're going to look at is Billy will talk to you a bit about inclusion in our school and how we amplify the continuum of support in our school, what that looks like in North Wicklow Educate Together. I'll talk a little bit about UDL in action and the process of how we've introduced UDL into the school, and throughout the presentation you'll hear voices from our school community, teachers, SNAs and students. I will say our videos are a little raw, so please bear with us. But we wanted to I suppose we had a conversation about what is inclusion, and that's been talked about this morning as well. And to us, I think inclusion is a sense of belonging within somewhere. So what we did is we've asked some of our students, and we'll give you a little glimpse into the life of our students and how they feel that they belong in our school. And we think that's what inclusion is. So At
the school, there is a lot of representation of different identities from all different cultures and like the LGBTQ community, and all different sectors of life are really well represented just throughout the school, which is really important. I think almost as important as it would be in a lesson, that you can see yourself just in your environment. It's not like it's just normalized.
I'll be that honest, the school and teachers, our class, anywhere else would scream at me, shout at me if I'm doing my work wrong or being bold. But
it's different. Everyone's kind of on the same level. Like all the years are kind of, they're not friendly, but they're not. But then I suppose in some ways they are friendly with each other, and the teachers as well. They don't like. They just, like, especially calling them by their first names, it just feels so much more normal. They don't feel like teachers. They feel like more, like you could relate to them a lot easier.
Teachers are very friendly. They always, I always ask them how they are in the mornings. They always ask me how I am, and just it's a nice environment. It's very welcoming.
Teachers, they have a very good relationship with the students, which helps a lot because we can be very open and we can be very honest to the teachers. They really help us.
Open teachers really help as well. You can just know that they are gonna help you with anything, and it makes you feel included and accepted, and it's just a very welcoming environment.
Sorry, I get lost in them. I'm so proud of them. They're so great. So I suppose when we were planning this session and thinking about how we would deliver it, I'm going to try very hard to stay in the same place. I don't stand still well. And when we were looking at it, and even as we've developed our piece of work in this area over the last, we're on our 4th year of the project now in our school, it's really important that when we start a new initiative, that it's not just popped into the middle of a staff room and see who wants to grab the pamphlet and go with that. It has to have a plug-in and a buy-in at a procedural level, at a policy level, at a practice level. And UDL for us and inclusion, they fit everywhere in the language of what we're talking. So it isn't actually something new. It will fit beautifully into LAOS. It fits really, really well into school self-evaluation. It fits really well into the inclusion framework. It fits into the code of conduct or the expectations for teaching council. It fits on so many levels, so it isn't something new. But also what we've realised is, not only is it not something new, as already has been stated, teachers are doing this all of the time already. So actually one of our biggest learning has been, it's around a reframing. It's around taking a moment to put on a lens of UDL and inclusion and ask yourself, where am I providing opportunity and choice? Am I looking to see where the barrier is? And can I help them around it, or can I knock it down? And it's that thinking, that way of thinking that asks us as leaders and our staff to think, is there another way of doing this? Can I provide a choice? And sometimes the choice will work and sometimes it won't work. And surrounding these, national pieces, and we see in things like student voice now, we've moved beyond student voice, and we talk about the Lundy model, and we talk about participation, but also giving them the right to say no. I don't want to tell you. I don't want to talk, I don't want to consult, I'm not interested. But that's also a response, and a meaningful response for the young person. And surrounding all of these things, we have these initiatives that are hugely important. I mean, this morning we spoke a little bit, I was mentioned the Autism Friendly Schools Project, which I've been involved in, has made considerable changes in our school. And there are other projects. I mean, this week I can't not take the opportunity to give a huge shout out to all the schools that are involved in Stand Up this week. The idea that our young people who are part of the LGBT community are seeing that visibility in their schools now. And, you know, to take a moment, I can remember very clearly being in school and it was illegal for me to be gay. I remember being in teacher training and it was only decriminalised when I was in my final year of teacher training. So inclusion does change things. It might feel like a long space between the law changing and the rules changing, but when I look at the lived experience of the young people in our school and in schools all over the country, they're living a different experience. So I suppose, as you said, the idea of we're preparing for that next generation, and we are, and I think with inclusion, the shift around how we amplify the continuum of support in our schools. And this is the fundamental concept, the most important concept in the decisions we make in schools, in the policy choices we make, and how do we amplify and operationalize this concept. And inclusion is a little bit like that. It can be quite nebulous and quite abstract. I suppose that's why we ask the question, do you feel like you belong here? Because it makes it a little bit more concrete to grab a hold of. But what tends to happen a lot in schools, and it's happened, I've done principalships in 2 schools, and naturally, because we get a resource, and we as school leaders, as a management team, as an AEN team inside of a school, we have to make decisions how we use that allocation. And it gives us as school leaders and school teams wonderful opportunity to be flexible and adaptable and responsive. But it also takes an inordinate amount of time. And both those things are not separate. They're absolutely okay. It's okay to give complex situations a complex amount of time because they need them. But it's seeing what does support for all look like? What does support for some and what does support for few look like? And for us, our home for UDL was always support for all. It was always around building the capacity of the classroom practitioner to meet the need of a more diverse range of students within that classroom. So that when the student was getting additional support through school support and school support plus, the support that the child or the young person was getting was plugged directly into a broader range of curricular options within the classroom. If not, what happens is the teacher will teach it one way, and then what would have been differentiation is outsourced to the AEN department. So they'll go out and do a bit of, in post-primary, some extra history or some extra English or some extra maths, or go back over the work that's been done in class. But it's harder then to put specific interventions, evidence-informed interventions across the support for some and the support for few. And we can't intervene our way out of a weak whole school teaching and learning practice, because we need to build up to capacity. And what we would have seen, and Fiona will talk about the idea of coaching and classroom observation, teachers have really realised they're doing this already. They're just shifting their language around a little bit with it. And what we wanted to do was to give you a couple of glimpses into our school. Now this would be, I suppose we would like data. I like information. I like to know how I'm using my time and my allocation. I like to be able to track how I'm using my time. And we also were very clear about knowing, with the 3 stages of using the SET model in our schools, identify need, meet need, and monitor and record need. As a systems level, our board of management, myself and Fiona and our team, we have to make sure we know where the need is in our school. Then it's a team's responsibility to how are we going to respond to that need and how are we going to monitor and record that need? Now you can see in our school we have a total population of 340 students, with 80 students in the school with a diagnosis of autism. We'd have 170, 50% of our student population have a student support file. That also, the one thing that's not represented there is the number of students with co-occurring conditions. What also is not represented in that piece of data is the intersectionality that comes into areas of inclusion and identity and all those different pieces that come into it. But when you see, even this year, we've noticed we're putting a much bigger focus this year on dyslexia and building the teacher's capacity to respond to that range of need, because there isn't one response. I suppose one of the advantages of having a school with a broader range of need is our teachers are very, very comfortable, and our S&A team are amazing at supporting and managing that need of that range of students. The other, I suppose, reality is 50% of every classroom will have a student support file. So we were also really, really conscious that we wanted to, at a systems level, school leadership, we have a responsibility to make sure that we make the information as accessible and as understandable and as useful to the teachers so that they're able to access. So we were very clear, how could we ask the question, who in your class has a diagnosis or an identified targeted need? And we had two pieces, and we'll show you now, the whole school needs file and the wheel of need. And the wheel of need is something we developed internally, and already we're changing it, because in doing it we realized, oh, actually that's meeting one piece, but it's not bringing us to another place. And it's in the change, it's in innovation. Exactly like being brave to make mistakes, you're going to make them, so go looking for them. Don't be afraid of them. And it's when you look for them, you go, okay, that didn't work, and we'll try something differently. So who in my class has a need? What is that need? Then they can go to the VSware system that we would use. They can identify a summary of the child's needs, and they can go in then and get a more detailed breakdown of it. And then they can go and access the student support files into department plans and lesson planning. But it was who, as an English teacher, who's in my class that has a need? What need is that, and how as a school are we responding? And our ultimate goal is to see on every assessment and report form and communication to parents and guardians that we see the targets identified in a student support file coming through every single subject. You can see that they're focusing on processing skills or on phonics or on spelling or whatever else piece of work that they're focusing on depending on the student support file. And that's an example of our wheel of need. And on an initial glance, when other schools have seen it, they go, oh my God, they love that, it's a really strong visual. But we're realizing now that that visual leads us towards differentiation and not towards universal design for learning. Because what it's doing, it's telling me in a very clear way, I can see, it gives me one really useful piece of information. I can see the variety of needs in the room. I can see the number of students with co-occurring conditions, which is hugely important. But also it leads the teacher towards a differentiation model and not towards a universal design for learning model. So we're currently reviewing that to see how can we present that information in a more interactive way. But not, when we try things, that's interesting, but can we improve it? Can it be better? Can it be different? Not that that's love, and I mean it is love, and I'm visual, I love an old diagram or a picture. Graphacy and oracy, not literacy and numeracy here. I'm the other side of that circle. There was loads of mention of numeracy and literacy, we forgot the other side. And again, you can take stats and information any way you want. But what we did was we've only done 2 leave inserts because the school is only 8 years old. So this was our last year's leaving cert results. So when we looked at the number of H1s, H2s, H3s as a percentage in our student body across our entire 6th-year group compared to the national averages. And it was really useful to analyse and say, well, if our 50 students who did the leaving cert last year, proportionally, are they getting in and around? Are we performing in and around national averages? And you can see there, the purple line is us. And the yellow line is the rest of the country. So, as a young school, as a board, and Derek is down there, our chair, and I can say, Derek, look, we're not doing too bad. We're fairly in line. But then when you look at that and you compare that to our range of need, so again, one of our wonderful team, one of our assistant principals, Neil helped us out greatly with this and looked at this information. And what we were doing was saying, well, if we look at the range of need in our school, more specifically, if we look at the range of need in that sixth-year group last year, compared to the national average range. So the national average is the yellow one in the middle, and we're the rest, we're the purple. And actually, following on what you said today, John, our AS is 1.5, not 3, so that should come down a little bit there. But the reality is, I know you can take information and manage it in any sort of a way, but certainly what that says to our teaching team, our S&A team and our students is, even though your range of need is far greater than the average might be, your performance is in line. And it's, again, at least we can look at that and go, we're facing the right direction. We might be in the ditch a bit, but we're still facing the right direction. And that's, for us UDL, it's that learning that's bringing us into a different type of conversation. And it's the gentleness of that. And Fiona will talk a little bit more about what that looks like and the other changes that we've made. But really, from my perspective as a school principal, you have got to use your allocation properly. My SET allocation is ring-fenced in concrete. It doesn't go anywhere else, but I can follow every hour of the 196 hours that I have. I know where they are, I know where they're broken down, I know where I'm using them, I know where the team is using them, because it is complex and it is the piece of my timetable that is flexible. And we need to focus on, with UDL for us, now we were already pushing an open door. Our staff, when I started in the school 4 years ago, it was one of the most inclusive environments I've ever stepped into. So, I mean, I can't take credit, or I wouldn't, but it was already there. What we've done is build on that capacity and build on that. But really focusing on classroom support and not seeing AEN as the job of an AEN team. AEN, supporting all learners, is everybody's job in a building. So it's building the capacity at that level, really being careful about provision mapping. I think Dr. Johanna Fitzgerald was in here earlier on, I saw her, but done a huge amount of work on provision mapping with Mary I, and that piece of work, even when we look at what provision are we providing, how are we using our time, what of our interventions are numeracy-based, literacy-based, social and emotional skills-based, communication skills-based, and there's making sure that our interventions are evidence-informed, that it's not, there's nothing wrong with doing curricular support, but sometimes a child needs a specific intervention to build a capacity within something like a reading skill or a numeracy skill or a social communication skill or a life skill. And those particular programs are really beneficial at focusing an intervention supported based on classroom support happening really well. Being responsive and demanding, and that's probably the hardest bit. When we go back to the continuum and we look at school support and school support plus, there's not a day goes by that I don't see Fiona in the office with Una, one of the AEN coordinators, changing timetables. And those timetables get changed so regularly based on emergent need. So if a child has an emergent need or there's a change or something's happening and they're in the AS class, but every child is dual enrolled, so they're in the dual enrollment, but they're not able for mainstream today, but we have to move people around so that they can access to the curriculum in the AS class. That's an hour's work, but it's done because we create the flexibility to make sure, and we see the value in being that responsive. Partnership and innovation, I think, and communication systems, and role clarity is really important. What's my role as? What are the key pieces I'm doing? And as a classroom teacher, their role clarity is very clearly laid out in a lot of national documents, so it's really just building capacity there. And really, really important is student participation. Nothing, for them without them. And that fundamental concept of, if we have student support files in our schools where the students haven't been involved, and it's challenging because sometimes they don't want to be involved, they don't want to be part of a process of identifying targets. Sometimes they don't want to talk, sometimes they can't talk. So how do you ensure that their voice is being represented in a meaningful way? And that, again, is hard work, because sometimes you have to chase it. And as a simple example, and I'm going to stop now, as a simple example, we changed our student council to move it so that every class group would have 2 representatives on student council, one by vote and one by random selection. And the random selection was very powerful because it means Kids get to nominate themselves and be voted and have the whole vote, and somebody wins, and another one is picked out of a hat. That child gets to say yes or no. But suddenly student council is much more representative. Suddenly that council looks, but that child always has the right to say no, don't want to be involved. Yeah, I'll do that. And there are small tweaks and changes you can make. So with that, I'm going to hand over. Oh no, it's the video.
Yeah. I'll click the go. So this is a piece from some of our staff. We're going to speak about how we, parts that we've used to operationalise the continuum.
The thing about universal design for learning in our school is that what I am allowed to do as an autism support coordinator is, I suppose, is very flexible. The senior management team are very supportive of any interventions that we put in place, and I'm allowed a huge amount of flexibility in the timetabling for the autism classes. For example, this year, nobody batted an eyelid when I reintegrated a child across multiple year groups, only across special interest favourite subjects. So we have a student who is currently sitting maths across 2 year groups and applied maths. The timetable doesn't fit any sort of a plan, but the flexibility that my senior management team allow me to implement a very specific timetable that's for a specific child is really, really helpful.
So I designed and implemented a pilot project called Movement Breaks for All using the Universal Design for Learning framework. We do 2 or 3 particular movement breaks, and everybody would participate in it. So it's like a brief exercise designed to give students a break. So you do things like a head press, where you'd be pressing down on the head. You'd be doing fist clenching. There'd be palm pushes. We became much more engaged in what we were doing. So it kind of worked out using the UDL lens very much to design the project, where we were making sure that everybody had access to the curriculum. It worked quite well.
Engaged in peer observations in the school, where we have gone into our colleagues' classes focusing on one aspect, say, of UDL, and that's been a very rewarding experience, because it's really interesting to see how different teachers teach, how they incorporate UDL into their teaching, and also how students that you may have react or engage in that lesson. So it's interesting. Sometimes, like I was in one which was a really interesting lesson, where a student that doesn't really engage with me was really fully engaged with the other teacher's lesson. So it gives you food for thought as well. It makes you think about, what can I do to try and engage and accommodate.
Let's talk a little bit about the process of how we've introduced UDL into our school. So what we would say is main things that we've learned over the past 4 years is that this is going to take a minimum of 3 years, but we are on year 4 and we are still well on in our journey. To make sure that you connect it to SSE or your DESH plan, connect it to middle management. They were our key drivers in implementing UDL into our school. It was the TLAR team, teaching and learning team, and they were the ones that really pushed it and really took charge and brought everybody with them. They created a working group. Make sure you're taking very small steps. We went whole school very quickly, because we're very lucky in that we have an amazing team that are ready for change. And as we'll talk about, and as you talked about, it wasn't a hard sell. It's stuff they're doing already. It's just a framework. It's about rethinking how you're doing it, but you are doing it. And that's what I say, make it whole school or a target area, and make sure you review and innovate. So very, very quickly, I'll kind of run through what we did. So myself and Billy started in as senior managers, the deputy and principal in 2020-21. So what we did first was we met with every department. We asked them what's going well, even better if, within the departments, trying to get feedback and see what's happening on department levels. What we found, the feedback was that the department plans were, there was no consistency in department planning. So the template itself wasn't consistent, or people weren't using it consistently. There was information in there that wasn't needed. So what we decided to do was to change the department plan, and we did that using the principles of UDL and using the framework of UDL. So we did our own reading and we did our own research on UDL, and we said, yes, this is definitely something that's going to sit well in our school. And it made it easier to design that template because it simplified the template down. So then what we did is we looked at the team. We did a teach meet with all of our staff looking at differentiation, so strategies that they use within their school. So again, like we were saying, we are moving, this is all a journey, and these were the words we were using and how we were starting the process. But then that summer, we sent our teaching and learning team off to do some serious training on UDL. So when they came back in September of the following year, and our first department meeting was led by our teaching and learning team, and they introduced UDL to the rest of the team. We introduced the new template at that stage, and the Wheel of Need was introduced there. So then following on from that, staff went away. They were inspired, I think, by their colleagues in explaining what universal design for learning was, and it wasn't this big scary thing that, oh gosh, we're not going to be able to do this. It is a framework. It is just rethinking how you're planning your lessons, stuff you're already doing. So we went back, we had our department meetings, we listened, we did a survey with all staff on UDL and its implementation. But the big learning and the big process, I think, here that really has embedded it, has made it something that's embraced by all, was introducing peer observations. So we wanted to introduce peer observations anyway, but then having the lens of UDL made it easier, I suppose. So we introduced peer observations on a very informal level. So teachers went in, they were observed by one person and they observed somebody else. It was all random selection, so they didn't get to choose. And they did a little pre-observation form saying, this is the area of UDL I would like you to focus on and watch. Then following the observation, they had a conversation with the person that observed them. And it was based around like a coaching model of a coaching conversation, very informal, just what do you think went well within that? Nothing was written down, nothing was put into a formal process. So that was kind of that first year. So then reflecting on it, coming into our third year, again, we had new staff starting the third year. So we had to go back and we had to do some more training with new staff. In the first meeting back in that September, we went through results of those peer observations, we did a bit of a post survey on what the reflections that people had on that year. So we went through that with staff, that first staff meeting. We did some extra training that year as well, which for new staff, but also for everybody. And we did it on a teach meet around UDL. So there was lots of talk of technology and how they use technology as a basis to introduce choice. And it was really interesting to see those. And we also had some training on coaching, which helped with that. We took feedback from people, and what they actually said was they would really appreciate more time for observations. So we'd only given 2 hours of our Croke Park hours to observations. So we said, okay, the following year we'll introduce 4 hours. So that's what we're at now. We're up to 4 hours of observation. So you get to observe 2 people and 2 people observe you. Going forward, then at the end of that year as well, talking of technology, and we're asking students to use technology more to help, and we're giving them choice of, do you want to dictate that, or do you want to, all of those choices. But the teachers themselves, their technology wasn't great, so we upgraded all of the staff laptops as well at the end of last year to help along the process. So I've got a little video of some of our teachers and students talking about. The teachers will talk about UDL in the classroom. The students, it's a piece of work we're going to do. Next year, we're looking at using the language with students a bit more next year, and I'll talk about that. That's our forward planning. So I just asked them, what do teachers do to help you learn within your classroom? So that's the question they've been asked.
For the UDL in my classroom, I believe that it gives me the chance to put myself in the shoes of all students. I think I have to reflect more on what I am doing in my class and how I'm engaging and facilitating the learning of each student.
Some things that some teachers do to help with learning is to make sure all of the materials from class have been uploaded to another to Teams or any other platform used by the class and teacher, because that can also give more options for revising, because you have the information down in a form that doesn't necessarily have to be your notes, which can be helpful if you find note taking difficult.
I think maybe
they put Ukrainian or Russian
subscribes in a video, or when they told.
You know, if kids aren't engaged, they're not learning. That was basically, you can go over and over things, you can try repetition, but if they're not engaged in it, it's kind of a waste of both your time. Through different forms of expressing themselves, like using video, using audio, like making songs, little films, those types of things as well.
Maths was that our teacher set up a kind of traffic light system for the different work that she gave us, which really helped all the different levels in the class to make sure that they were doing what they needed to be doing. So you had your green. If you maybe needed some more help understanding the concept, you could do the very basics. And there was no pressure to change levels. It was very open. It was very much up to you what you needed to do or what you wanted to do. Then you had your amber, which is kind of, you just need some more practice. You feel like you're getting it. And then red, which we really got to utilize, was that kind of expanded level that's almost past like what's expected of you. But again, it really helps with making sure that you not just memorize off the concept, but that you understand it, you're able to apply it to different things, and really helps ingrain it in your memory and make the lessons more applicable to everybody.
I like the maths support classes. The individual timetable has helped me to come to school and engage in education. I like the movement breaks. They help me to regulate my emotions. I like the one-to-one sessions with my teacher because I can speak about anything that is on my mind.
Okay, so they are just some voices from the school community, and as I say, we are on a journey. It's choice. They are talking about choice, and it is becoming more the language of the school, and the students know that they have choice within their learning and how they express or how the learning is presented to them. So moving forward for this year, our main thing is, like I said, we're going to do our peer observations. We've given more time to it so that there'll be 4 hours. We're going to do some more training with new staff. We're looking at how we interlink UDL with behaviour. So we're doing a lot of work around behaviours in school and how we can use UDL as the language of those interventions. Sharing practice, we're looking at other schools. We're working with other schools and we'll be doing observations with those. And as I said, students in UDL, that's the point that we haven't really got there yet, but we will. This is part of this year's project, is to make sure that language of UDL and students are more aware of what's going on that way. Parent surveys, we've done a massive parent survey about the school, and the big thing is, like Billy said, that Wheel of Need looks fabulous, but it needs a lot of work. So it's food for thought on that. But thank you very much. Oh, hold on.
And just, we leave this slide up for you, but it's just, I suppose we were very conscious that we were able to start whole school because we were a relatively small school and we were a young school. But the starting point is really important, that you think about where the right starting point is for you in your school and not bite too big. Slow and steady.